Husband tricked me into selling everything I had and started a new life with his mistress. But he never expected this. You won't believe what I discovered. Imagine trusting someone with your whole life, only to find out they've been lying to you behind your back the entire time. My husband, the man I thought I could trust, was secretly planning his escape with another woman. They took everything: my house, my savings, my future, but I didn't let them win. Stick around to find out how I took back my life, and make sure you don't miss the shocking twist at the end. Trust me, you won't want to turn this off. I never thought I'd find myself in this situation. If you'd asked me a few months ago, I would have told you that my life was everything I had ever dreamed of. I was 37, a successful financial analyst at one of the top firms in Dallas, Emerson, and Bailey. My career was on track. My friends respected me, and I had a beautiful home, a modest but cozy 3-bedroom house on a quiet street in the suburbs, surrounded by oak trees and the hum of a peaceful neighborhood. I thought I had everything I needed. I had my routine. My life was steady. I had Jake. He was my rock. Or at least I thought he was. Jake and I had been together for almost 10 years. We met at a company holiday party, both of us a little too drunk to keep our balance, laughing about how we were the only ones still hanging around after everyone else had gone home. It was the kind of silly moment that makes you believe fate had a hand in it. He was charming, smart, driven. We clicked instantly. At first, I wasn't sure about him, but there was something about his ambition, his passion to succeed, that made me want to root for him. It wasn't long before I saw him as more than just a colleague. He became my partner in everything. He promised me that together we could conquer the world, and I believed him. We built a life together. I supported him through career changes, tough decisions, and even when his consulting business failed. I took on extra work, dipped into my savings, and did whatever it took to keep us afloat. It wasn't easy, but I always told myself, this is just a bump in the road. It'll pass. And Jake, always with that sparkle in his eyes, promised me things would get better. So when he came to me 3 months ago with the idea of moving to London, I didn't hesitate. He had secured a job with a big international firm, a fresh start, a new adventure. It felt like a dream, an exciting new chapter in our lives. At first, I was hesitant, of course. Moving overseas is a big deal. But Jake convinced me. This is the opportunity of a lifetime, he said. Think about it, Amara. A whole new world. We can reinvent ourselves. I trusted him. I really did. Maybe I should have known better. Maybe the warning signs were there, but I didn't want to see them. So I sold our house. The place we had bought together. The home I had worked so hard for. The one that held so many memories, my first home. The one I had dreamed of since I was a little girl. I gave it all up, just like that. I sold the furniture, the things that had taken me years to pick out. I even sold my grandmother's antique mirror, the one thing that tied me to her. Jake said we needed to simplify. We were starting over. No baggage, no clutter, just a fresh start in London. He told me we needed to travel light, that we didn't need anything but each other and our dreams. So I liquidated everything. It felt like we were getting rid of the past, cutting away the weight that had been holding us back. I thought I was doing the right thing. Then, that night, as I sat in our almost empty living room, my laptop open in front of me, something happened. I was checking emails, trying to wrap up the last few loose ends before our big move, when I saw it. The email thread was between Jake and a woman named Kate. Kate. My heart skipped a beat. My hands went cold. I didn't want to read it, but my eyes couldn't look away. There were months of messages, months of lies, plans, dates, promises, everything. Everything they had been planning behind my back. I stared at the screen, my breath catching in my throat. Jake was talking about their new life together, about how they were ready to leave me behind. I couldn't believe it. My stomach turned as I read his words, the casualness of it all, as if it was just a simple change of plans. And then it hit me. This wasn't just about a job in London. This wasn't just about moving across the ocean for a new start. It was about him leaving me with nothing. I sat there, frozen, for what felt like hours. When Jake walked into the room, his eyes darted toward the suitcase by the door, and I knew he had been planning this all along. I finally found my voice shaking with anger. "How long?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "How long have you been planning this with her?" Jake hesitated, guilt flashing in his eyes for a second before he mumbled, 8 months, Amara. It just happened, and then the plan just evolved. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, but I couldn't make sense of it. "Evolved?" I repeated, like it was some natural progression to destroy your wife's life. I was shaking now, the betrayal sinking in deeper with every passing second. I felt sick to my stomach. The man I had trusted, the man I had sacrificed everything for, had been planning his escape with another woman, using me as nothing more than a stepping stone. "Where is the money, Jake?" I demanded. "Where is it all?" I could already hear the answer in my head. The accounts, the savings, the house all gone. Just like that. He avoided my gaze, and I saw the truth in his silence. "You always land on your feet," he said, trying to sound calm as he reached for his suitcase. "You always do." He said it like it was nothing, like I was just some resource to be discarded once he was done with me. And in that moment, something inside me snapped. He was right about one thing: I did land on my feet. Always. But this time, I would make sure he paid for underestimating me. I wish I could say I handled it well, but I didn't. How could I? How do you process something like that? Something so deep, so raw. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was everything. The trust I had given him, the life I had worked so hard to build, shattered in an instant. The man I thought I knew, the man I thought I loved, wasn't just planning a new life. He was planning it with someone else, someone who wasn't me. And the worst part? I had been the fool, the one who believed in him, the one who gave everything for him, all the while he was lying, deceiving me. As soon as Jake walked out the door, it felt like the world around me had stopped moving. There was nothing but silence, thick and suffocating. My heart raced in my chest, but it didn't feel real. I kept expecting him to walk back through the door, to tell me it was all a mistake, to apologize and beg me to come with him. But he didn't. He was gone. And in his place was a hollow emptiness, a void where everything I thought was true was now gone. I don't know how long I sat there after he left. Maybe it was minutes, maybe hours. The sun had started to set, casting long shadows across the room. I couldn't look at the space we had shared. The empty furniture, the boxes that were supposed to be filled with our things, seemed to mock me. My fingers trembled as I stared at the laptop screen. The emails between Jake and Kate burned into my memory like a brand. I could feel the anger building up inside me, but it was the kind of anger that was icy, calculating, and sharp. It was the kind of anger that didn't need to shout to be heard. It was the kind of anger that would make him wish he never messed with me. I opened the email chain again, scrolling through the messages. There were dozens, hundreds, each one more damning than the last. My mind was spinning as I read through them, piecing together the lies he had told me. The lies about London, about the job, about everything. It wasn't real. It had never been real. It was all a game to him. I wasn't his partner. I was a pawn. I was just a stepping stone on his way to what he really wanted. And that wasn't me. It was Kate. It took all of my self-control not to slam the laptop shut. Instead, I printed every single message. Every word. Every lie. I needed proof. I needed something to hold on to, something that would remind me that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't imagining all of this. This wasn't my fault. It couldn't be. I leaned back in my chair, my mind racing. I had to do something. I couldn't just let him walk away like this. He thought he had won. He thought he had gotten away with it. But he hadn't. Not yet. I picked up the phone, my hands shaking as I dialed my cousin Nina. She picked up on the second ring. "Amara? Are you okay?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. I need your help, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I need to find out everything. I need to track every dollar, every cent. I need to know where it all went. I could hear Nina's sharp intake of breath. Are you sure about this? Amara, this sounds dangerous. I don't care, I snapped, the desperation creeping into my voice. He's taken everything from me, and now I'm going to take it back. Okay, Nina said softly. Just be careful. I ended the call and sat there, staring at the mess around me. The weight of the situation pressed down on my chest. I wasn't just dealing with a cheating husband. This was bigger than that. This was fraud, manipulation, and deceit, and it was all directed at me. I had to take action. I had to fight back. I spent the next few hours combing through every piece of information I had. My mind, trained to analyze financial data, kicked into gear. I opened my laptop again, but this time, I wasn't searching for messages or emails. I was searching for a trail, a pattern. I started going through every transaction, every withdrawal, every transfer. The money had to be somewhere. It had to be. He couldn't have just disappeared with it. He had to have left a trail. And then, I found it. A large transfer, $400,000, moved from our joint account into an offshore account. It wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate. And it wasn't just money from the house sale. It was more, much more. My heart raced as I realized what I was looking at. This wasn't just about a few $100,000. This was about everything. Jake had been siphoning money out of our accounts for months, and I had been too blind to see it. I dug deeper. The more I uncovered, the worse it became. There were more transfers, more accounts, and they all led back to Kate. She wasn't just his mistress. She was the mastermind. She was the one pulling the strings, manipulating everything, setting it all up. They had planned this. Every detail, every move. They had planned it all while I was sitting here, believing in them, believing in us. I felt the anger rising again, but this time it was different. It wasn't just fury. It was cold, calculated. I wasn't going to let them get away with this. I was going to make them pay. I called my boss, Linda, at Parker and Reed. She picked up immediately. Amara, what's going on? I need your help, I said, my voice calm now, but with a sense of urgency I couldn't hide. Jake has done something illegal, something big. I need access to the company's financial tracking tools. I need to follow the money. Linda hesitated. Amara, that's against company policy. I know, I said quickly, but I'm the one who's uncovered this. You know what I'm capable of. Please. I need this. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Finally, Linda spoke. Okay, but be careful. If you get caught, it's not just you who'll be in trouble. I understand, I said. Thank you. I'll be careful. I hung up and sat there, the weight of what I was about to do sinking in. But I didn't care. I was done being the victim. I was done letting them walk all over me. I had the skills, the knowledge, and now I had the evidence. I wasn't going to sit by and let them get away with this. I spent the rest of the night working, sifting through the data, following the money trail, piecing everything together. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins as I tracked the transfers, the withdrawals, the accounts. Every new piece of information felt like a victory. By the time the sun began to rise, I had everything I needed. I had proof. I had their plan. And now, I was ready to make my move. I wasn't just going to let Jake and Kate destroy my life. I was going to bring them down. One way or another, I was going to make them pay. By now, you're probably wondering, how deep did this betrayal go? Did I get everything back, or was it too late to stop them? What's worse, I uncovered something even darker than I expected. Was Jake and Kate just the tip of the iceberg, or is there more to this story? Comment below. Do you think I'll get the justice I deserve, or will they slip through my fingers? Drop a 1-1 for justice or @woo22 for betrayal. Let's see what you think. The next few days felt like a blur. I moved through them in a haze, my mind constantly racing, piecing together the fragments of my shattered life. Every time I closed my eyes, all I could see was Jake's face, that same face that I had trusted for years, now a stranger to me. I couldn't stop replaying the moment he walked out the door, his suitcase in hand, his words echoing in my ears. "You always land on your feet." He thought it was over. He thought he had won. But what he didn't know was that I wasn't the woman I had been just a few weeks ago. I was something else, now something stronger. And this time, I was in control. I spent every waking moment buried in research, the adrenaline keeping me awake and focused. I started connecting dots, tracing every piece of the puzzle that Jake and Kate had so carefully arranged. I dug into the financial records I had found, pulling up old bank statements, credit card transactions, and emails. There were so many holes, so many missing pieces, but the more I looked, the more everything began to make sense. My mind, trained for years to analyze patterns, suddenly felt like a machine, each discovery driving me closer to the truth. I found out that the $400,000 wasn't the only money they had stolen. They had been siphoning funds from our accounts for months, maybe longer. Jake had set up a series of fake investments, channeling money into accounts I didn't recognize. The more I dug, the more I realized that this wasn't just about a mistress or a betrayal. This was about something far bigger, far more sinister. Jake and Kate weren't just stealing money from me. They were running a financial scam, a Ponzi scheme. They had scammed investors, people just like me, people who trusted them. I was one of their marks. They used me to fund their entire operation, bleeding me dry while they set up their new life with stolen money. My blood boiled as I scrolled through the evidence, but I kept pushing myself forward. I wasn't going to let them get away with this. I called Nina one night, my hands trembling as I dialed her number. She picked up on the first ring. "Amara, what's wrong?" "You sound..." She paused, her voice dropping. "You sound like you're about to explode." "I think I know what they've been doing, Nina," I said, my voice tight. "It's not just about the money. They've been running a scheme, a big one. And I'm not just the victim here, I'm one of their accomplices too. They've been lying to me for months, and now they're trying to cover it all up. But I won't let them get away with it." Nina was silent for a moment, and then I heard her sigh. "What can I do to help? I need more than just a friend right now. I need someone who knows how to get their hands dirty. I need someone who can help me take them down." I didn't care how it sounded. I wasn't asking for permission anymore. I wasn't asking for sympathy. I was demanding action. Nina hesitated, then replied, "I can't do this alone, Amara, but I'll help you, whatever it takes." And with that, I started to feel the first stirrings of something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. It wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about making sure they understood what they had done, making sure they paid for it. The next few days were a whirlwind of phone calls, emails, and research. I contacted my lawyer, Sarah, to get her advice. She wasn't surprised by the news, but told me that proving fraud wouldn't be easy. "You'll need hard evidence, Amara. You'll need a clear trail, or this could turn into a he said, she said mess." That night, I sat in my small office, the glow of my laptop screen the only light in the room. The documents on my desk were scattered in front of me, every page filled with details of transactions, accounts, and hidden funds. I felt like a detective, piecing together a story I had never wanted to know. I scrolled through the messages between Jake and Kate again, trying to understand the full extent of their plan. They had been careful, too careful, but they made one critical mistake. They underestimated me. They didn't think I'd figure it out. As I sifted through the evidence, something caught my eye. A small detail, something I'd missed before. The timing of the transactions. Every time Jake and Kate made a move, there was a pattern. Every third day, the same amount of money would be transferred between accounts. It was too precise to be a coincidence. I pulled up a chart, tracking the funds across multiple accounts, and there it was, proof that they were laundering money through multiple layers, making it almost impossible to trace. I couldn't believe it. They thought they were untouchable, but now I had them, and I was going to make sure the world knew the truth. I called Nina again, breathless with excitement. I found it. I found the pattern. This is it. This is what they've been doing, and I know how we can catch them. Amara, slow down. What are you talking about? Nina's voice was steady, but I could tell she was nervous. They're laundering money, I said. I have everything I need. I just need to act on it. The next few days were a blur of planning, phone calls, and strategy. I contacted the authorities, but I knew it wasn't enough to just bring them down on a personal level. I needed to make sure everyone who had been affected by Jake and Kate's scam got the justice they deserved. I called my old colleague at the firm, Linda, and told her everything. Linda, who had always believed in my abilities, was shocked but supportive. Amara, she said, her voice full of concern, are you sure you're ready to go this far? This could get messy. Once you expose this, there's no turning back. I'm not backing down, I replied. Not this time. And so the wheels were set in motion. I couldn't go back now. The truth was out, and I was ready to watch it all come crashing down. Every step I took now felt like a victory, each moment leading me closer to the confrontation I knew was coming. Jake and Kate had no idea what they had unleashed by underestimating me. They thought they could get away with it. They thought they could ruin me. But what they didn't know was that I wasn't just a victim. I was their worst nightmare. And I wasn't going to stop until I saw them pay for everything they had done. It was like waking up from a nightmare, only to find that it wasn't a nightmare at all. It was real. The anger I had felt when Jake left, the betrayal, the overwhelming feeling of helplessness, it all swirled inside me, fueling something new, a need to act, a need for justice. The truth was finally settling in, piece by piece, but it wasn't enough to just know what happened. I had to do something with it. And the more I dug into the mess they had made of my life, the more I realized how deep the hole went. They didn't just steal from me. They stole from countless others, and they thought they could get away with it. Not if I had anything to say about it. The first real breakthrough came late one night when I was sitting in my living room, the only light coming from the glow of my laptop. I was digging into the transaction records again, trying to follow the money trail to find something that could lead me to the next step. At first, it all looked like a jumble of numbers and accounts, the usual stuff I'd seen countless times as a financial analyst. But then it hit me. I was looking at it wrong. I wasn't just tracking transactions, I was looking for a pattern. And when I shifted my focus, when I stopped trying to piece together the mess, and instead started looking for the rhyme and reason behind it, it all started to make sense. Every third day. That's what I found. They were transferring funds every third day. It wasn't a coincidence, it was deliberate. They had structured their scheme with this methodical precision, hiding money in multiple accounts, creating layers and layers of complexity that would make anyone, especially someone like me, miss it. But I didn't miss it. I had been trained to spot these things. It was what I did every day at work, spotting irregularities, finding patterns in financial data that others overlooked. It was the same skill I used to help multi-million-dollar companies avoid fraud. And now, it was going to help me bring down the man I had loved, the man who had ruined me, the man who had used me to fund his entire fraudulent operation. I sat back in my chair, the weight of what I had just uncovered hitting me all at once. My hands trembled as I pulled up the details, the sheer scale of what Jake and Kate had done starting to sink in. They weren't just stealing from me. They were running a Ponzi scheme. They were luring in investors with fake returns, building trust, and then bleeding people dry just like they had done to me. I was just one of their many victims. And as the realization washed over me, a cold determination settled in my chest. I wasn't going to be another nameless victim. I was going to make them pay for what they had done, not just to me, but to everyone they had scammed. I called Nina again, my voice low and steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. I found it. I found their pattern, and it's bigger than I thought. There was a pause on the other end of the line before Nina spoke. What do you mean? What did you find? They've been running a Ponzi scheme, Nina. It's all right here. They've been scamming investors, people just like me, and I was too blind to see it. But now I have everything. I know exactly what they've been doing. I knew it, she said, her voice a mix of disbelief and anger. They thought they could just destroy you and walk away with everything. But now you've got them. You've got the proof. I have the proof, I repeated, my voice growing stronger with each word. And I'm not letting them get away with it. Not this time. The adrenaline was starting to kick in now, fueling me, pushing me forward. I couldn't waste any more time. I had to act quickly. I reached out to my lawyer, Sarah, and explained everything I had uncovered. She listened carefully, her voice calm but serious. Amara, you've got the evidence, but this is going to be tricky. You're going up against professionals, and they've got money and connections. But you're right, what they've done is criminal. We've got to take them down. I felt a surge of relief. Sarah didn't hesitate. She was in this with me. She understood the gravity of what we were dealing with. I wasn't alone in this fight anymore. And together, we could make sure that Jake and Kate faced the consequences of their actions. Over the next few days, I poured everything into building a case against them. I went over the evidence again and again, making sure I didn't miss a single detail. My mind was sharper now, focused like a laser. Each discovery, each new piece of information felt like a victory. But it wasn't enough yet. Not until Jake and Kate were held accountable. Not until I made sure they couldn't hurt anyone else. Then, one afternoon, the phone call came. It was from Linda at work. Amara, we've been contacted by the FBI, she said, her voice tense. They're investigating the transactions you flagged. This is bigger than just you, Amara. They've been watching Kate for a while. She's not just some mistress, she's a professional con artist. I felt the blood drain from my face. This wasn't just about Jake anymore. Kate was involved too. She was the mastermind. She had been manipulating him, using him just like she had used me. And now the FBI was involved. The wheels were in motion. It was happening. They've already arrested Kate, Linda continued, her voice steady but tinged with disbelief. They have enough evidence to take her down, and they're moving on Jake now. I couldn't believe it. After everything, it was finally happening. But part of me wasn't satisfied. I wanted more. I wanted to make sure they knew exactly what they had done to me. I wanted them to feel the full weight of their actions. And that's when I knew what I had to do. I logged into Jake's email account. It wasn't something I was proud of, but I didn't care anymore. He had taken everything from me, and I was going to use his own arrogance against him. I had access to everything he had hidden, everything he thought was safely locked away. And now, I was going to make sure everyone knew the truth. I copied everything, the emails, the plans, the lies, and I sent it all to his colleagues, his friends, his clients. I wanted to ruin him. I wanted him to lose everything, just like he had made me lose everything. Within hours, the fallout began. His professional world came crashing down. Emails flooded in, calls started coming in, and I knew this was just the beginning. Jake had thought he could destroy me. But what he hadn't realized was that he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. The tension in the air was almost suffocating. Every second felt like an eternity. And yet, at the same time, everything was moving too quickly. I had spent the past few days digging, sifting through the financial wreckage that Jake and Kate had left behind. And it was becoming more and more clear this wasn't just a betrayal. This was something far bigger than I could have imagined. A part of me still wanted to scream, to break down, but I couldn't. Not now. Not when I was so close. Every discovery was another piece of their plan, another nail in their coffin, and I wasn't going to stop until they paid for what they had done. The more I dug into the records, the more I uncovered. Each transaction felt like a puzzle piece falling into place, and with every new detail, the plan Jake and Kate had put in motion became more calculated. They weren't just having an affair and running off with the money. I wasn't just a casualty in their twisted game. They were actively building a financial empire based on lies, deceit, and manipulation. They had been running a Ponzi scheme all along, using my trust, my hard-earned savings, to fund their little charade. And as the layers peeled back, I saw how deep the deception ran. They had other victims, people who trusted Jake and Kate the way I once did, who had been taken for everything they were worth. It made my blood boil. I couldn't keep going at this pace without letting it consume me, but I also couldn't stop. The investigation had to be thorough. I wasn't just going to rely on the obvious pieces. I needed to find the cracks in the foundation, the mistakes they had made, and I knew they had made them. People like Jake and Kate, they got sloppy when they thought they were untouchable. The greed blinded them. And I would be the one to expose it all. One night, after hours of combing through emails and bank statements, I found something that stopped me dead in my tracks. It wasn't even a big transaction, but it was the timing, the nature of it, that caught my eye. It was a small transfer, $50,000. Not a huge sum, but it was from one of the joint accounts I had shared with Jake. It wasn't flagged before because it was done so subtly, with the kind of precision that only someone with a financial mind would notice. This wasn't just money moving between their accounts. It was an attempt to hide a critical piece of evidence, a critical link. They had transferred funds right before a major withdrawal was made, just to cover their tracks. My stomach churned as I realized what this meant. It was the kind of slip-up that could break their entire scheme wide open. I didn't hesitate. I reached for the phone and dialed Sarah, my lawyer, barely able to contain my excitement. "I found something," I said, my voice barely steady. "I have proof that they've been covering their tracks. I need to move fast." There was a pause on the other end of the line before Sarah responded, her voice calm but with a note of urgency. "What did you find?" $50,000, I said, almost breathless. "Transferred from one of our accounts just before a major withdrawal. It's the kind of thing that screams they were trying to hide something. I have it all, proof of their cover-up. This is it, Sarah. We can nail them now." "Hold on," she said quickly. "I need you to stay calm, Amara. This is huge, but we need to make sure we're not missing anything. You need to gather everything you have and send it to me. I'll have my team look at it." "I've already done that," I said, my fingers almost trembling as I spoke. "It's all in the files I've sent over. I've traced every penny, every move. This is bigger than I thought, and I won't let them get away with it." I hung up the phone, feeling a mixture of excitement and fear. The walls were closing in on Jake and Kate. They thought they could get away with it. They thought they had planned everything so perfectly, but they didn't know me. They didn't know what I was capable of. I spent the next several days in a frenzy. Sarah's team was reviewing the evidence, and I was going over everything again, making sure I hadn't missed a thing. Every new detail felt like a victory, but it wasn't enough. I needed more. I needed to bring them down. I couldn't let them destroy my life without facing the consequences. And as I worked, I found even more disturbing things. Kate wasn't just involved in Jake's financial dealings. She was the mastermind behind much of the scam. She had been orchestrating everything from the very beginning, pulling the strings and making sure Jake stayed in line. They had been running this scheme for years. They were in this together, a partnership based on lies and greed, and they had used me to fund it all. The more I learned, the more I realized just how far they had gone. Kate had a network of people who had no idea they were being used. They trusted her, believed in her, and she had taken them for everything they were worth. I wasn't the only one. I wasn't the first to fall victim, but that didn't matter anymore. All that mattered now was making sure this ended, making sure they paid for what they had done. Then came the day when I finally had everything I needed. It was all there in black and white, every email, every transaction, every document that tied Jake and Kate to this fraudulent empire they had built. I felt a sense of relief wash over me, but it was fleeting. The real work was just beginning. I had to take this to the authorities, to expose them, to make sure they couldn't hurt anyone else. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about making sure Jake and Kate couldn't destroy any more lives. I called the FBI, told them everything. They didn't hesitate. They were already investigating Kate, and now they had the evidence they needed to go after Jake. Within days, they were moving in, and I felt a rush of triumph. This was the moment I had been waiting for. This was the moment I knew without a doubt that I had won. Jake and Kate were going to pay for everything they had taken from me, and they were going to lose everything in the process. The day the FBI called, my heart was racing, and not just because I had been waiting for this moment for so long. It was the weight of everything that had led up to this point, the hours spent tracking transactions, the sleepless nights, the unrelenting anger that had driven me to the edge. But now, here it was, the confirmation. Everything I had worked for, every move I had made, had led to this moment, and I wasn't about to let it slip away. The agent on the other end of the line was calm, professional, but I could feel the urgency in his words. Miss Montgomery, we have reviewed the evidence you've provided, and we are moving forward with the investigation. We need you to meet with us in person, but I need to prepare you. This is bigger than we initially thought. Jake and Kate are part of a larger operation. They have been scamming people across multiple states, and they've been doing it for years. I felt the air leave my lungs. It wasn't just a personal betrayal. This wasn't just about my money. This was about an entire network of people who had been destroyed by their lies, and I had been one of the last to see it. But it didn't matter anymore. What mattered now was making sure they paid for every penny they had taken, every life they had ruined. The FBI was setting up a meeting with me, arranging for all the necessary legal steps, but in the back of my mind, I knew that I wasn't done yet. I wasn't going to let them slip through my fingers. The investigation wasn't over. I still had one card left to play, and I wasn't going to back down now. If I had learned one thing from all this, it was that when you're up against people like Jake and Kate, people who think they can get away with anything, you can't stop until you see them fall. I spent the next few days gathering my thoughts, going over everything I had learned. The FBI was moving fast, but I wasn't going to wait for them to act. I knew I had to make one final move, something that would finish it once and for all. That's when I remembered something that had been nagging me from the very beginning: Jake's arrogance. He thought he was invincible. He thought he had covered every trace, every transaction, every lie. But there was one thing he hadn't counted on: me. The morning after the call with the FBI, I sat down at my desk and opened the last file I hadn't touched. Jake's business account. I had saved it for last because I knew it was the one thing that could break everything wide open. I had been carefully tracking the accounts, but I needed one final piece of the puzzle. And I knew exactly where to look. I found it almost immediately. There it was, a single unexplained deposit, a large one, into a private account Jake had opened under a fake name. I'd seen the account numbers before, but they hadn't raised any flags at the time. Now, though, I could see it for what it was, the heart of their operation. The money trail had been hidden, but not well enough. The deposit had been split and moved around in several small transactions, but once you knew what to look for, it was easy to follow. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, staring at the screen, my mind racing. I had the evidence now. I had what I needed to take them down once and for all. This wasn't just about proving their guilt. This was about making sure they lost everything. Jake had taken everything from me: my home, my savings, my trust. Now, it was time to make him pay for every penny he had stolen from so many others. I called Nina, the one person who had stuck by me through all of this, and told her what I had found. "I have everything, Nina," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, but the excitement was breaking through. "I've got the account. I know where the money went. I know how it's all connected. This is it. We're done." She was quiet for a moment, and I could tell she was processing the magnitude of what I was saying. Then she spoke, her voice full of conviction. "So, what now?" "I'm going to send everything to the FBI," I replied. my fingers already flying over the keyboard. And then I'm going to make sure they know who they're dealing with. I was done being the victim. I wasn't going to let them hide behind their lies any longer. Jake and Kate thought they had everything figured out. They thought they could walk away from this, but they couldn't have been more wrong. I gathered all the files, all the proof, and I sent it off to the authorities. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I hit send. This was the moment. It was finally happening. And I knew, with every fiber of my being, that Jake and Kate would never see it coming. Within hours, the fallout started. The FBI moved quickly. They froze accounts, they seized properties, and they sent out warrants. The reality of what they had done hit them like a ton of bricks, and I couldn't help but feel a sick satisfaction watching it unfold. This was what they deserved. They had stolen from so many people. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about the trust they had shattered, the lives they had ruined. The next morning, the phone rang. It was the FBI again, but this time, they had something different to say. Miss Montgomery, we've already started making arrests. Jake and Kate are in custody. We've got them. You were right. They've been running a scam across multiple states, and we've got everything we need to bring them to trial. The words hit me like a wave, and for the first time in days, I allowed myself to breathe. It was over. They had been caught. Justice was finally being served. But even more than that, I had done it. I had taken everything they thought they had from them. I had taken back my life. And in the process, I had made sure they would never hurt anyone again. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming what was mine. And I wasn't going to stop until I had it all. The moment the FBI called and told me that Jake and Kate were in custody, I should have felt relief. I should have felt like the weight was lifting off my shoulders, like I could finally breathe again. But instead, I felt this unsettling calm, like I was in a holding pattern, waiting for something else to come crashing down. The truth is, everything had been leading up to this moment, but now that it had finally arrived, I wasn't sure what came next. I had been so focused on revenge, on getting them to pay for what they'd done, that I hadn't taken the time to think about what would happen once they were gone. I hadn't thought about how this would affect my future, or how I would pick up the pieces of my life after all the dust settled. The FBI had been efficient. They had moved fast, gotten the evidence they needed, and made sure Jake and Kate couldn't escape the consequences of their actions. But I was left standing there, trying to piece together a life that had been stripped away, piece by piece, for months. And now, I was supposed to go back to being normal. How could I? What was normal anymore? I stared at the phone after I hung up, my fingers numb. The silence in my apartment felt deafening, the same silence I had been drowning in ever since. Jake had walked out the door. I should have felt victorious, but all I could feel was this strange, heavy emptiness. They had been caught, yes. Justice had been served, but at what cost? The truth was, I wasn't sure I could trust anyone anymore. Not after what Jake had done to me. Not after everything Kate had taken from me. It wasn't just the money. It wasn't just the house or the career I had fought for. It was everything. The trust, the love, the belief that, no matter what, we had each other's backs, that we were in this together. And now I didn't know if I could ever feel that again. But I wasn't about to let that break me. It couldn't. Not after everything I had gone through. I wasn't the same woman I had been a few months ago. I had been tested, and I had come through the other side stronger. And now, I had to keep moving forward. I had to figure out what the next chapter was going to look like. And I knew one thing, it wasn't going to include Jake or Kate. In the weeks that followed, the news of their arrest spread quickly. The media caught wind of the Ponzi scheme they had been running, and suddenly, I wasn't just some heartbroken woman who had been taken for a fool. I was a part of a larger story, one that was making headlines. Every time I turned on the TV or checked the news, there it was. Businesswoman and her partner arrested for defrauding investors in a multi-state Ponzi scheme. It felt like I had no control over my own narrative anymore. The truth was out there, yes, but the world didn't know the full story. They didn't know what it felt like to have everything you trusted ripped away from you. They didn't know what it was like to be the person who had to clean up the mess. They didn't know what it was like to feel like a complete failure. And yet, there I was, being thrust into the spotlight, forced to face a public that didn't know the real me. The trial was a whirlwind. I had to testify against Jake and Kate, to tell the world what they had done, to stand up and face them. It was a surreal experience being in that courtroom, watching them sit there, looking so much smaller than they had when they'd been part of my life. Kate had a smug look on her face, like she thought she was going to get away with it. But she didn't know who she was up against. When I took the stand, my hands shook, but my voice didn't. I told them everything they had done to me, how they had manipulated me, how they had stolen everything I had worked for. And I didn't flinch. I didn't hesitate. I wasn't going to let them take anything else from me. Jake looked different. He looked broken. Gone was the confident man who had stood by my side, the man who had promised we'd make it through anything. In his place was a man who had lost everything. His arrogance was gone. The smugness was replaced by guilt, and I could see it in his eyes. For the first time, I saw him for who he truly was, a man who had used me, a man who had betrayed me in the worst way possible, and I wasn't about to let him get away with it. But as I spoke, I realized something else. It wasn't just about Jake and Kate anymore. It wasn't about them at all. It was about me. It was about reclaiming my life, my trust, and my future. It was about rebuilding everything they had torn down. I had thought that the moment they were arrested, I would feel a sense of closure. But closure isn't a switch you can flip. It doesn't just happen because you win. It happens slowly, in pieces. It happens when you start seeing the world differently, when you begin to realize that your past doesn't define you. And that's what I was starting to understand. Jake and Kate were convicted. They were sentenced to prison, and the authorities managed to recover some of the stolen money. But even as I watched them get led away in handcuffs, I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel like I had won. I didn't feel like I had lost either. I just felt empty. There was no joy in seeing them suffer, no pleasure in their downfall. All I could think about was how much time I had wasted, how much of my life I had given to someone who didn't deserve it. But it wasn't just my time that was gone, it was everything I had believed in. The day the trial ended, I sat on the steps of the courthouse, waiting for the world to start feeling like it had again. But the world hadn't changed. I had. And I realized for the first time that I didn't need Jake or Kate to define me. I didn't need them to complete me or make me feel whole. I had always had the strength inside me. I had always been the one to land on my feet, no matter what. And now I was going to rebuild. From the ground up. I had my whole life ahead of me, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me again. As I stood up and walked away from the courthouse, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't relief, but it was something stronger. It was hope. A hope that the next chapter of my life would be better. And this time, I would write it on my own terms. The day of the trial was almost surreal. I had imagined this moment in my mind 1,000 times since Jake walked out. Since the moment I realized that everything I had believed in was a lie. I had told myself that when I stood in that courtroom, when I faced Jake and Kate, I would feel victorious, like I had reclaimed my life, like I had taken control of the wreckage they had left behind. But standing there, looking at them, I didn't feel victorious. I felt numb, like I was watching the story unfold from a distance, like it wasn't even me on the stand, recounting everything they had done to me. I had been prepared to tear into them, to make them understand the depth of the hurt they had caused. But as I spoke, the words came out differently. I wasn't screaming in anger, demanding they pay for what they had done. I wasn't letting myself get lost in the fury anymore. Instead, I told the truth calmly, factually, but with a quiet power that felt like it had been building inside me for months. The evidence was all there. The betrayal was all laid bare, but I wasn't the one broken. I wasn't the one who had lost. I was the one who had fought, and I had won. Jake sat there, his face gaunt, his eyes hollow as he listened to my testimony. His arrogance was gone, replaced with something else, something I didn't recognize, something that might have once resembled guilt. He didn't look like the man who had conned me into trusting him. He didn't look like the man who had promised me forever. Instead, he looked small, fragile even. He looked like someone who was finally facing the consequences of his actions. But I wasn't sure he fully understood what that meant. His eyes darted nervously, avoiding mine, as if he knew I was the one who had won. Kate, on the other hand, sat next to him, her expression unreadable, but I could see the way her fingers clenched in her lap, the slight tremor in her hands that she was trying to hide. She was pretending to be unaffected, but I knew she was scared. And in that moment, I realized something, what I had always feared, what I had always thought was the worst thing to happen, wasn't the worst at all. The worst thing wasn't losing everything I had. It wasn't having my trust shattered or my life turned upside down. The worst thing was that they had underestimated me, and now I was about to make sure they would never forget it. The court session dragged on, but I didn't care about the legal technicalities or the courtroom drama. I wasn't interested in winning the case in the traditional sense anymore. I was here to finish what I had started. I was here to take back everything they had stolen, and I was here to make sure Jake and Kate couldn't hurt anyone else. I wasn't just testifying about the money they had stolen, the lies they had told, the businesses they had destroyed. I was testifying about the damage they had done to my soul. I was testifying about how they had stolen my peace of mind, my sense of safety, my belief in love, in loyalty, in trust. They hadn't just stolen money. They had tried to break me, but they hadn't succeeded. As the trial drew to a close and the jury deliberated, I found myself alone in a quiet hallway of the courthouse. My lawyer, Sarah, had just finished speaking with the prosecution team, and I stood there, my hands still shaking, trying to keep it together. I had done it. I had faced them. I had exposed them for who they really were, and I had told the world what they had done. The only thing left now was the verdict, and as I waited, I realized something else. I wasn't just waiting for the justice system to do its job. I wasn't waiting for them to pay for their crimes. I was waiting for myself to feel something, anything, to feel the relief, the satisfaction, the sense of closure I had been imagining for so long. But I didn't feel anything, not yet. It was like a fog had settled over me, thick and heavy. I had prepared for this moment, but now that it was here, it felt like I was suspended in time, unsure of what to do next. The jury was taking longer than I had expected. It felt like hours had passed, though it was probably only minutes. My mind was racing, thinking about the case, thinking about the lies, thinking about Jake. The last few months had been a whirlwind, but now that I was standing on the edge of the finish line, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't quite ready for it to end. I wasn't ready to leave the courtroom and move on. I wasn't ready to walk away from everything that had happened and start over. And then, the door to the courtroom opened, and Sarah stepped out with a slight smile on her face. "Amara," she said softly, walking toward me. "It's over. They've been found guilty." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. For a second, I couldn't breathe. I couldn't process it. "Guilty?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Really?" "Really," Sarah said, her smile widening. "Jake and Kate are both going to prison. They'll be sentenced in a few weeks, but it's over. They'll pay for what they did." I stood there, frozen, the weight of her words sinking in slowly. I didn't know what to feel. Part of me wanted to collapse right there on the floor, to let the flood of emotions I had been holding in wash over me. Another part of me wanted to scream, to let the triumph of it all consume me, but all I could do was nod, my throat tight with unshed tears. It was over. The fight had been won, and for the first time in months, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't relief. It wasn't closure. It was something deeper, something more powerful. It was the knowledge that I had reclaimed my life, that I had fought back, and that I had survived. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I walked out of that courtroom, a different person than the one who had walked in. I was no longer the woman who had been deceived, the woman who had lost everything. I was the woman who had stood up, who had fought back, and who had come out the other side stronger than ever. And as I walked into the rest of my life, I knew one thing for sure: I would never let anyone, especially Jake and Kate, take my power away again. The battle had been long, and it had been brutal, but in the end, I had won. And nothing at all, could ever take that away from me. The weeks after the trial were a blur of emotion and reflection. Everything I had worked for, everything I had fought for, had finally led to this moment. The victory over Jake and Kate was bittersweet, and I couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of emptiness. The adrenaline of the courtroom was wearing off, and with it, the realization that my life had been torn apart by the people I trusted the most. The man I had married, the one I thought I knew, and the woman who had been by his side all along, they had betrayed me in ways that were hard to even comprehend. But as much as their actions had shaken me, there was one thing that kept me grounded: the knowledge that I had reclaimed my life, that I had not only survived but was stronger than I had ever been before. In the quiet moments, when I found myself alone, I couldn't help but reflect on the woman I had been. The version of me who had believed in Jake's lies, who had given everything she had to support his dreams, to build a life with him. I had been blind, but now I saw everything for what it was. All the late nights he spent working, the unexplained trips, the sudden changes in our finances, it was all there, in plain sight. I had ignored the signs, trusted him without question. I had believed in the future we were supposed to have, in the life we were building, and that belief had almost destroyed me. But it didn't destroy me. It broke me, yes, but it didn't define me. The broken pieces of my past were scattered around me, but I could see them for what they were: reminders of the woman I had been and the woman I was becoming. I wasn't the same person I was when I had first met Jake. I wasn't the same person I had been when I first walked into that courtroom. I had fought for my life, for my future, and I had won. And the best part was that I had done it on my own. No one had come to my rescue. No one had given me a handout. I had dug deep, faced my demons, and found the strength to rise above it all. The months after the trial were filled with change. It wasn't just about healing from the trauma of betrayal, it was about rebuilding my life, brick by brick. I had to learn how to trust again, not just other people, but myself. It was hard. There were days when I felt like I was still walking through a fog, unsure of where I was headed. But with every step, I found myself becoming more and more confident in my ability to shape my future. I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't afraid of being alone. I wasn't afraid of starting over. I started with the basics. I moved out of the apartment Jake and I had shared, the one that had become a prison of memories. I found a small, cozy place in a quieter part of the city, far enough away from the reminders of him, of us. It wasn't much, but it was mine. It was a new beginning. As I settled into my new space, I found myself finally breathing in a way I hadn't in years. The weight on my shoulders was lifting, piece by piece, as I started to put the past behind me. But there were still moments, small moments, when the memories crept back in. When I would find myself staring at my phone, thinking about how I used to check in with Jake at the end of the day, asking about his meetings, about his travels. I used to believe in the illusion of normalcy we had created. I used to think that the life we had was the life I had always wanted. Now I knew better. I had fallen for the illusion, and it had cost me dearly. But the most important thing I had learned was that the illusion wasn't real. I had never needed Jake to feel complete. I had never needed anyone to validate me. I had always been enough. I started going out more, meeting new people, reconnecting with friends I had lost touch with over the years. I found joy in the little things again: long walks in the park, cooking dinner for myself, laughing with friends over a glass of wine. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was living for me, not for someone else. and it felt incredible. I also threw myself back into my career. I had worked hard to get to where I was before everything had fallen apart, and I wasn't going to let Jake's betrayal take that from me too. I had always been passionate about my work, and now it became my anchor. I threw myself into financial analysis with a new sense of purpose. I became more involved with my colleagues, taking on bigger projects and pushing myself further than I ever had before. I realized that success wasn't about the money or the titles, it was about the satisfaction of knowing that I was building something meaningful, something that was mine. As time passed, the whispers of Jake and Kate's downfall faded into the background. The media stopped covering their case and the world moved on, but I didn't forget. I didn't forget what they had done to me, and I didn't forget what I had learned about myself in the process. I had come face to face with my deepest fears, and I had overcome them. I had learned how to let go, how to forgive myself for the mistakes I had made, and how to move forward with my head held high. Then, one day, I got a letter in the mail. It was from the lawyer handling the final settlements from Jake and Kate's trial. The letter was short, businesslike, but when I read it, I felt the last piece of the puzzle fall into place. The court had ruled in my favor. Not only had I won the case, but I had also been awarded a significant portion of the assets that Jake and Kate had stolen from me. It wasn't just money. It was a symbol of everything I had fought for. It was the final reminder that I had not been defeated. I sat down at the kitchen table, the letter in front of me, and for the first time in months, I let out a long, deep breath. The journey was over, and yet, it wasn't. I had won, but the real victory was in how I had gotten there. The real victory was in reclaiming my life, my worth, and my future. And now, as I looked at the letter in my hand, I realized that the true reward wasn't the money, it was the strength I had found within myself. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. I smiled as I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. The future stretched out before me, wide open and full of possibility. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace. The peace that comes from knowing that no matter what had happened, no matter how much I had lost, I was still here, and I was going to be okay, because I had learned that I was enough, and that above all else was the greatest victory of all. Can you imagine being on the verge of losing everything, and then fighting back with every ounce of strength you have? It wasn't just about taking my life back, it was about showing them they can't mess with me. But what happened when I finally exposed their lies? Was it the victory I expected, or did it lead to even more shocking consequences? You'll never guess how this ends. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Tell me, what would you have done in my shoes? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and let's talk. What I've learned through all of this is that trust is powerful, but so is self-reliance. People can betray you, even those you love, but you have to remember your worth. Life may knock you down, but it's up to you to stand back up, to rebuild from the ground up. Never let someone's actions define you, especially when they try to take what's yours. Strength isn't about what you've lost. It's about what you can gain from the ashes. No matter what happens, don't lose sight of who you are. Keep fighting for yourself because you are enough.